around who can vote and leaves it to the states in essence. So until the 1840s, the states kind of kept it to the richest people, the richest males, I should say, that were all white, and the guys who were most important to the society at the time. And so starting in 1840 and until 1856 when the last state passed it, each of the states slowly allowed those without land to vote. And so this wasn't didn't include women, but it was just all the men, and it allowed a much wider voting base. Then in 1870, just after the Civil War happened, they expanded it in the 15th Amendment to include people of races and colors, and still not women, but that included the voter base a lot. And what that did was introduce all these new ideas to the United States government. And whenever somebody had a campaign, they now had to think about these new people who were added to the voter base and think about what they cared about and change their campaign based on what these new ideas were. Then in 1921, the 19th Amendment was introduced, and this is the one that included the women into the voter base. So what basically happened was that when World War I was happening, all the women started to join the workforce, and they felt like if they could work and they could be an important part in society, they should be able to vote for who's leading it. And this led to the 19th Amendment, and when the women did get to the right to vote, now they were this new interest group that were asking for equality and better wages and things like that, and more opportunity to work by themselves and not depend on men as much. And this was more voters that were joining the voter base, and more people that campaigns had to worry about and appease and whatever they were saying. Then comes one of the less important ones, but there's the 23rd Amendment, and that's about Washington, D.C., which previously the people who lived in Washington, D.C. weren't allowed to vote because it wasn't a state, but the 23rd Amendment allowed them to vote, which is more people to add, I guess. Then the 24th Amendment stopped poll taxes, which a lot of states were doing, and it was stopping people, specifically black people in the South, from voting because these taxes were too high for them to vote. So if you were a homeless person or somebody who struggled on a day-to-day basis, you didn't have the money to come vote, and if it was already taking up your time, you didn't want to throw money into that as well. But with the 24th Amendment, they were able to come, and there was no longer going to be a tax no matter what, and that allowed yet again more people to vote, and now the poor people specifically, which added even more ideas. Then finally is the 26th Amendment, which came about around the time of the Vietnam War, and it lowered the voting age from 21 to 18, which is very important because people who were 18 could go into the draft in Vietnam, but they couldn't vote for who was leading the country. And they found this very unfair and pushed intensively for this expanded voting to their age so they could vote, hey, we don't want the guy who's going to keep us in this war, because a lot of people were very opposed to the war. So that finishes off the amendments involving it. And now it comes to why is this important? And basically, when you add new people to the voter base, and you add all these new groups, these new interests spring up as well. And as candidates, you should probably work around some of these ideas and include them if you think they can go along with what you're saying. And that'll allow you to bring in some of these extra voters that in, say, the 1820s didn't exist. And it allows you to bring up pull these minorities together and get a much wider amount of votes as a result. So when a campaign starts and some people might accidentally alienate one group or another, and a lot of other candidates will focus on this so that they might get those votes instead. And this can cause a really big swing in the election, especially for like a large group that tends to vote a lot for one side, and then So such as like African American people towards the Democrats. If the Democratic candidate had been racist at some point, and then all of a sudden a good percentage of African Americans start voting for Republicans, then that could very much sway the election in that year. So some candidates are not exactly the best at this and accidentally alienate quite a few, or even sometimes intentionally alienate quite a few minorities. And this can cause for some minor problems, but sometimes they just somehow end up in the top of the polls anyway. So here today is going to be Donald Trump in his 2016 campaign ad that will be pretty much showing how not to deal with these minorities and how not to appeal to their ideas, because he's going directly against that.
Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
The politicians can pretend it's something else, but Donald Trump calls it radical Islamic terrorism. That's why he's calling for a temporary shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until we can figure out what's going on. He'll quickly cut the head off ISIS and take their oil. And he'll stop illegal immigration by building a wall on our southern border that Mexico will pay for.
We will make America great again.
In this ad, Donald Trump greatly decreases his chance of gaining many votes from Hispanic or Muslim groups by alienating those groups as a whole. He proposes these radical plans for these newcomers to keep them out, which will be disagreeable to many that are already in the country. Politicians with a better view of these amendments and Constitution might not run this type of ad. So it's up to you, my educated viewers, involved members of the United States, to take these views to heart and make America fantastic again.